China challenged the U.S. Navy ship. Big mistake. That's what we're checking out today, guys. I'm Phil, and that's Samantha. And who are we, Sam?
We are Bars and Barbells, and we're about to find out why it was a big mistake.
That's right. This is a relatively new video, so I don't know if this is recent. I don't remember hearing about this on the news or anything like that. So I'm interested to find out, like I said, whether it's recent or this was, a time previously that, they're making a video about now. But like I said, this is a recent video. So just came on our radar, and this is what we do, guys. We check out military content, comedic content. We do music, we do history, we do cultural influence, we do sports. So if you got recommendations for more military content like this, drop it down low in the comments section. Sam, what do you think? Did China make a big mistake?
From the U.S. perspective, probably.
Let's find out what that mistake is right now.
At 09:23 hours on June 14th, 2025, the USS Princeton was conducting another routine freedom of navigation patrol in the South China Sea when her spy radar painted something that would nearly start World War III. A Chinese-type O-52D destroyer that had been loitering at 200 kilometers just as she suddenly accelerated from 18 to 30 knots in under 90 seconds. Unknown to the Americans, the Jiancheng's captain had just received orders from Beijing. Intercept the Americans and make them blink first. But Beijing was about to learn why challenging the U.S. Navy in open water remains a spectacularly stupid idea. The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, you see here, had been doing what American sailors have done best for 75 years, keeping the world's most important sea lanes open so Chinese factories could sell their cheap electronics to Best Buy. They were 180 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territory in international waters, where $3.4 trillion in annual trade flows like clockwork. The strike group's mission was textbook freedom of navigation, predictable course, transparent intentions, and the kind of professional conduct that separates real navies from floating militia. At 09:26, the target classification was complete. The radar operators had positively identified a Type O-52D destroyer of the Chinese Navy with a threat assessment of moderate to high. Inside the Princeton's Combat Information Center, the tactical action officer watched the Chinese destroyer's vector with the calm that comes from having 122 vertical launch cells loaded with enough firepower to turn any Chinese ship into fish food. The spy radar, the world's most advanced naval sensor, painted a picture so clear you could point out every detail of the enemy ship. At the Chinese destroyer's current speed, he'd reach weapons engagement range in exactly 17 minutes. The map was simple but terrifying for the Chinese. Her YJ-18 anti-ship missiles could cover the remaining distance in under 4 minutes once launched, but the Princeton's SM-6s in surface mode could reach about 240 nautical miles and swat them like flies. At 09:29, the captain wanted to know the probable intent of the Chinese ship. The answer was obvious. At current speed and heading, she'd be within weapons release range in 14 minutes. The recommendation was to go to general quarters, but the captain's response was pure American confidence. Let's see how badly they want to embarrass themselves first. That's even if they could get there safely. The South China Sea was packed with merchant traffic, 46 commercial vessels within 50 miles, all depending on the U.S. Navy's presence to guarantee safe passage. A Singapore-flagged container ship loaded with semiconductors, a South Korean LNG tanker worth $200 million. All would be at risk if Beijing succeeded in turning international waters into its personal swimming pool. But that would require them to actually win a fight against the U.S. Navy, which hasn't happened since never. At 09:30, the Princeton's cooperative...
I'm wondering if this is an American-made video, Samantha.
That's what I said in the beginning when he said a mistake. I was like, from the perspective that we're going to hear, I think so.
Yeah, so it is interesting to see how much economic activity goes through that corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Really makes you put into perspective if there were a conflict or anything like that between two of these huge countries on the world stage, how influential it would be to the little things that we get and receive, in the West, or, the transportation process, even from China, because obviously their businesses heavily rely on trade as well. that the disruption economically would be in the, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, that would really impact everybody around the globe, because this is such an important transportation process that happens here.
Yeah, one thing I also noticed is they showed the jet being launched off the ship deck. And I was like, we know how that happens now because we watched a video on that.
Yeah, we've dove into some cool stuff on the channel, so make sure you check out some of our other videos.
Engagement capability automatically shared the threat data across every ship in the strike group. The Nimitz herself, 104,600 tons of floating American diplomacy, carrying 90 of the world's most advanced aircraft, adjusted her flight operations with the precision of a Swiss watch. The destroyers, Changhoon and Kidd, shifted positions to take station around the carrier that would turn any Chinese attack into a one-way trip to the bottom. At 09:35, the tactical...
Well, that's confusing. They said that one of the name was USS Changhoon. I would assume that would be a Chinese name.
Picture went from concerning to dangerous. The E-2D Hawkeye orbiting at 25,000 feet, providing a God's eye view of everything within 400 miles, detected multiple aircraft launching from the Chinese carrier Shandong. The radar signatures were consistent with those of J-15 fighters, climbing hard and heading south, as if they actually stood a chance. The air controllers immediately noticed something hilarious. The J-15s were struggling to gain altitude, likely due to fuel limitations from the ski jump launch system the Chinese were so proud of. A minute later, the sonar operators added the final piece of China's coordination puzzle. They detected a possible submerged contact 80 nautical miles away, an acoustic signature consistent with a Type 039 diesel-electric submarine. The funny part? The thing was making noise like a freight train. Any competent submarine crew would have been mortified. The Chinese weren't just being aggressive, they were orchestrating a multi-domain intimidation campaign with equipment that belonged in a museum. Surface ships from the 1990s, carrier aircraft that couldn't carry a full weapons load, and submarines so loud they might as well be broadcasting their position on AM radio. It was textbook bullying, the kind that only works if your target is too weak or too scared to fight back. Unfortunately for Beijing, they'd just challenged the wrong Navy in the wrong ocean. The U.S. Navy had been perfecting blue water dominance since 1914, and these Chinese forces were about to receive a free lesson in why the American Navy reigned supreme. By 09:37, the USS Nimitz flight deck erupted into controlled chaos that only American carriers have truly mastered. FA-18E Super Hornets from BFA-14 Top Hatters rocketed off the catapults at 45-second intervals, a ballet of precision that Chinese carriers, dependent on inefficient ski jumps, could only dream of matching. Steam billowed from the catapult tracks as American naval aviation did what it does best: project power.
So one thing I am curious about is the creator of this video is hating on the ski jump mechanism for launching. And I'm curious as to why, because intuitively it does seem to make sense that you would get better runoff if you have a little bit of an angle. And I assume, that's why when you go off a ski jump, right, you get more altitude when you're going through that jumping process. But maybe with the engine and the propulsion side of things, that changes the dynamic. So maybe you guys can give us some insights down below as to why just the flat standardized takeoff is better, or it's not any better to do the ski jump process. And because I have no idea.
I think it probably also, this is just my guess, that it probably depends if you want more speed or if you want more height, right? Because the straightaway, you're going to get more speed, and like from a jet, go forward, whereas the ski jump, you're going to slow down because of the resistance against going up first, right? So that's my guess.
Yeah, I'm just saying though, like they had said in this video that they're struggling to get at altitude, right? The Chinese fighters. So
because they're going slower.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is that, there has to be a reason why they would go through that ski jump process to think that they were like, because the ultimate idea is to get altitude, right? To get up into the sky as fast as possible. So, I think the idea would have been the ski jump allows you to get up into the sky faster, right? Because the speed and altitude should be combined. That's my thought process. Anyways, you're probably right, is that that's where the difference will take place between the speed that you get versus, when you're traveling uphill, you don't get as much speed, right?
Yeah.
But why would you do that? That's why I'm asking. Why would you do that if
Yeah.
it wasn't effective in some way, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The 1st Division of Super Hornets climbed through 15,000 feet. Their AN/APG-79 ASA radars already painting the incoming J-15s at maximum range. The technological mismatch was almost unfair. The APG-79's 1,100 transmit-receive modules could track dozens of targets simultaneously, while the J-15's mechanically scanned radar swept back and forth like a lighthouse, broadcasting its position to anyone listening. The J-15s were struggling for altitude, a painful reminder of the Shandong ski jump limitations. Without catapults, they launched with reduced fuel and weapons loads. They were climbing hard to gain an energy advantage, but burning fuel at a faster rate. Meanwhile, the American fighters, launched at full combat weight, had fuel to spare and carried hands rated E for everyone. However, the weapon and fuel loadout was just the advantage the Chinese could physically see. Every F-18 was connected via Link 16, sharing sensor data in real time. When one aircraft saw something, they all saw it. Chinese pilots, meanwhile, relied on voice commands and individual sensors, like fighting a network team while blindfolded. The technological gap wasn't measured in years, but decades. The E-18G Growlers entered the fight without firing a shot. These electronic warfare variants carried ALQ-99 jamming pods that could fry enemy electronics from 100 miles away.
Wow.
As they established their jamming orbits, Chinese communications began to fragment. On Chinese radar screens, ghost contacts multiplied. American fighters appeared and disappeared, multiplied and merged. What looked like 4 F-18s became 12, then 20. Radar locks broke and reformed constantly. The J-15 pilots found themselves fighting phantoms while real threats maneuvered unseen. The Americans executed a tactical spread called the Wall, a defensive formation perfected over decades. A high cap at 35,000 feet, medium at 25,000, and low at 15,000. Multiple overlapping engagement zones, mutual support, and nowhere for the Chinese to go without entering someone's weapons envelope. The Americans had the Chinese in a vice 3 times over. The Chinese formation, by contrast, remained bunched, a necessity when your data links can't support distributed operations. They had to maintain visual contact to coordinate, making them predictable and vulnerable. Their J-15s might look impressive on propaganda posters, but in actual combat, they were flying antiques against networked 21st century warfare. At 0943, the RC-135V rivet joint provided crucial intelligence. This ungainly Boeing 707 derivative had been boring holes in the sky for 6 hours, its electronic intelligence equipment cataloging every Chinese emission. The Mandarin linguists aboard were having a field day. Dark Star confirms Chinese pilots requesting permission for aggressive maneuvers. Repeat, they're asking for clearance to buzz our ships. The Chinese were escalating, but asking permission first. American pilots, trained to seize initiative, found this pretty funny. By the time Beijing approved anything, the tactical situation would have changed 3 times over. Meanwhile, the Princeton's defense systems tracked every threat with mechanical precision. Her spy radar, capable of tracking objects the size of a baseball at over 165 miles, made the Chinese destroyer look like a barn door. Fire control solutions were updated continuously, and soon it seemed like they might actually come in handy. At 0947 hours, the Jianqiang crossed a line that would have triggered immediate retaliation from any other navy. Her Type 346A phased array radar stopped searching and locked on to the USS Nimitz with fire control quality tracking.
Well, that's wild. I mean, I'm like honestly blown away if this is actually what happened as recently as like 2 months ago. I'm blown away that things escalated this much, where they're launching multiple aircrafts and fighter jets against each other, and And all of this just initially from the confrontation that happened at sea between, an increase in speed between Chinese vessel and all that.
It sounds like it escalated quickly.
Well, that's what the other thing I was going to say. We're at, I think, 47. So it would have been like 20 minutes later that you have all of this happening in a blink of an eye. And it kind of shows you how quickly things can escalate. And all it takes is a couple of decisions within, 30 minutes to completely alter the fate of the entire world. Really, it's obviously scary. But I am wondering, how truthful this is as well, because it seems like there are some details in here that I don't know how the creator of this video would have had access to unless this was official release or something. But from my experience with military comms, it's like they don't tell you all these things that happen. So
it's a source of inside information.
Clearly things are being embellished a little bit in this video.
I was going to say the comedic commentary has me in this. I'm just like, oh my God.
But it is cool to see all the different weaponry and
the antiques.
Yeah, the antiques, but on the contrast to that, all the things that could, even if this is just a theoretical exercise, it is interesting to see a lot of the things that we haven't covered. Like we've done the F-22, for example, but we haven't done a lot of these other aircrafts and stuff like that, right? So
and all the different ships.
Yeah, so that is informative. But I did find it comedic as well that they're talking about this modern military equipment that the U.S. has while showing like videos from 15 years ago, and they're using these, these keyboards that look like they're from
1999.
Yeah, like the videos are clearly very, very outdated. I'm sure all of that stuff now they have is like, touch screens or, very sleek modern equipment, right? But they're not going to get those inside videos right now because then you'd be leaking information to how you operate to your enemies, right?
Yeah, we're using probably old stock footage here.
Yeah.
Searching and locked on to the USS Nimitz with fire control quality tracking. In naval warfare, this is one breath away from launching missiles, the electromagnetic equivalent of pointing a loaded gun at someone. Inside Princeton CIC, the response was immediate but measured American discipline, drilled through countless exercises, held firm. The Chinese were betting American restraint against their aggression. They were about to learn that restraint didn't mean inability. The Princeton's own fire control radars remained in standby. Her 122 vertical launch cells contained enough firepower to send the Jianqiang to the bottom in seconds. SM-6 missiles that could reach out 240 kilometers, and SM-2s in surface mode, all ready to turn the ship into the area's newest artificial reef. Every firing solution is continuously updated. The Chinese destroyer was at risk from multiple systems, from multiple angles, with zero chance of survival if this situation escalated. The fire control lock persisted for exactly 30 seconds, long enough to claim they could have attacked, not long enough to trigger American self-defense measures. It was choreographed aggression, but against the wrong opponent. The Princeton's crew documented everything: timestamps, signal characteristics, and bearing data. Information that would be quite useful in a real shooting war. But despite the Chinese ship stopping its illumination, things were far from over. In the air, a J-15 pilot decided to demonstrate his own recklessness. Breaking from formation, he dove toward an F-18 with what fighter pilots call a thump, an aggressive close pass meant to intimidate. The American pilot, trained at Top Gun, where such maneuvers are eaten for breakfast, simply rolled inverted and pulled into the Chinese fighter's 6 o'clock position. For 3 seconds, the American had a perfect firing solution. His helmet-mounted display showed the Chinese fighter's engines glowing hot in infrared. One squeeze of the trigger would send an AIM 9X Sidewinder straight up the J-15's tailpipe. He didn't squeeze. Professional discipline held. The moment passed, but the Chinese still had one trick up their sleeve. The Chinese escalation reached its peak when the submarine made its move. The Type 039 diesel-electric boat had been creeping closer, using the layer depth to mask its approach. At 0951, it made a critical error, raising its snorkel to recharge batteries. Teo, sonar, subsurface contact, bearing 159, range 15,000 yards. Contact is snorkeling. Classified as probable Type 039. He's making noise like a freight train. The submarine captain either didn't know or didn't care that the Princeton's SQQ-89 sonar suite had been tracking him for the past hour. The ship had its acoustic signature cataloged, its position fixed to within meters. If this went kinetic, he'd have about 12 seconds to contemplate his life choices before an ASROC turned his boat into fish food. The tactical picture had become a textbook study on how not to conduct naval operations. Chinese forces had positioned themselves in a box, a carrier to the northwest, a destroyer to the west, and a submarine to the southwest. If shooting started, none of them would survive the first 5 minutes. And the Americans were about to show them exactly how that would go down. At 14:30 hours, the USS Nimitz launched everything that could fly. 48 aircraft roared off her deck in the largest single-carrier display of air power in years.
What?
Super Hornets loaded with live weapons.
Okay, I can't believe this.
EA-18G Growlers carrying electronic warfare packages that could black out a city. E-2D Hawkeyes commanding the electric high ground. The afternoon sky turned dark with American aircraft. The Growlers went to work first. Their ALQ-99 pods operating at full power turned Chinese radar screens into modern art. False contacts appeared by the hundreds. Real aircraft vanished into electronic noise. The Shandong's air defense picture looked like someone had thrown paint at the screens. Chinese controllers couldn't distinguish real threats from ghosts. Everything was a threat. Then came the submarine. A Virginia-class attack submarine that had been shadowing the Chinese formation for 8 days. Silent, invisible, patient. At 15:47, she surfaced 6 nautical miles from the Shandong, close enough for Chinese lookouts to see her black hull with their Mark I eyeballs. The psychological impact was devastating. 8 days of undetected operations, their entire anti-submarine screen, helicopters, sono buoys, and hull-mounted sonar had failed to detect the 7,900-ton American submarine.
Wow, that's
If this had
huge.
been war, their carrier would already be toast. The sub's commanding officer ordered an emergency surface purely for effect. The submarine burst from the water like a breaching whale, water cascading off her hull in the afternoon sun. Photographers on the Chinese ships would have perfect shots of American dominance. After about 90 seconds, enough time to be seen, photographed, and reported, she slid back beneath the waves. The message was clear: we own the undersea domain. Back in the air, American fighters demonstrated ACM, air combat maneuvering, at the expense of increasingly desperate Chinese fighters. The J-15s, already low on fuel from their ski-jump launches and hard climb to altitude, found themselves unable to match the Americans turn for turn. Each engagement ended the same way: American fighters in firing position, Chinese fighters defensive and burning precious fuel. One by one, the Chinese fighters peeled off, heading back to the Shandong with near-empty tanks. Their combat endurance had been exhausted in fruitless attempts to match American capabilities. They landed with emergency fuel. Some probably saw the bingo light they'd only seen in simulators before. By 1623, the Shandong's carrier strike group began its withdrawal. Official Chinese communications spoke of completing scheduled exercises. But everyone knew the truth. They'd come to demonstrate Chinese naval power, to intimidate lawful navigation, to claim waters that didn't belong to them. Instead, they'd received a lesson in why the South China Sea is America's 6th Great Lake. Bye for now.
Oh, I can't with this guy.
All right, so I'm going to take a moment and see if this actually happened. All right, from our brief overview, there was no official information that we could find that concluded that this actually took place. But
Maybe this was a military fictional story.
maybe. I really was like, when they said all of those aircraft took off at the same time, I was like,
48 or
I
something.
think we would have heard about that on the news somewhere, that there was this much of a confrontation putting us this close to World War III with China. But maybe it was a theoretical version of what could have played out if there was a conflict. But this is something that I think in the South China Sea, it is an area of contests all the time.
Yeah, and like you said, whether it was true or not, like it shows how fast things could escalate if people were to kind of keep pushing things and not standing down, right? I was kind of confused though, because at one point it was talking about 9 in the morning, and then it would barely touch 10 a.m., and then all of a sudden we jumped to 2 in the afternoon. I was like, well, what happened in all of that time period in between?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was a little bit
Took
confused.
a while to die down, apparently. But the point is, I think that even still, that could, all that could happen within a few hours, right, of escalation. So,
Especially because they're trained to move so fast.
yeah. So, anyways, hopefully we don't reach that point. But clearly, the person that made this video, and a lot of you watching this may agree that the U.S. has a stronger Navy than China. I think that is definitely a theme that we've come across a few times on the channel about the U.S.'s military capabilities are, above and beyond in a lot of respects. But I think there's new technologies out there that we never know what's happening. So
Yeah, for sure. And I personally was entertained by the unhinged commentary. So
it was definitely the very diabolical trash talk that was happening. So hopefully the Chinese don't take anything too personally.
Yeah.
But if they do, you guys will probably be saying they can't do anything anyways. But anyways, I enjoyed checking the video out. Nonetheless, it was entertaining, good entertainment value. You guys can give us more insights down below. We appreciate them. Thank you so much for supporting our channel. Have a great day. We'll see you on our next video.
Thanks for watching.